I will go ahead and open the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal session for July 13th of 2023. It is 10 o'clock in the morning. And Commissioner Johnston, would you please lead us in the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, if you are joining us today, if you could please sign in the back. Thank you. Item C is our calendar session. Anything to add to the calendar, commissioners?
Nothing.
I have nothing.
Let's see. I'm not seeing anything either. Ken, Christian, anything to add to the calendar? No. Okay. All right, item D is public comment. This time period is reserved for public comment on any topic other than an agenda item, a quasi judicial land use matter, or topic scheduled for a public hearing. We did receive some written testimony regarding the public hearing later in our agenda. But if you are here to offer public testimony on any other issue, please come forward at this time or raise your virtual hand. Okay, hearing none. We will move on to department updates. There's nothing today. There's nothing on our work session calendar. We do have a few items on our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Item H is old business. There's nothing today. Item I, other business. I1 is consideration of authorization to submit an application for the 2023-2025 through 2025 Oregon Youth Authority OYA Juvenile Crime Prevention JCP Basic and Diversion Services State Grant. And so these are the two different funding mechanisms that we use for juvenile justice programs.
Chair, I move approval.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or questions?
I got a question and hopefully Ken can answer it. So even though this is on a biennium from the state, we have to do it yearly and cut it in half. And so is this just?
It is.
Because half of this was already allocated into last year's budget, right?
Well, this is 23-25, so that would
It's
be
for
the
a 2-year.
current biennium that just went into effect July 1. And so we're applying for the funding for this year.
What was the comments in Jessica's that half of this was already in the previous year? If I read it correctly.
Let me.
So in 23-25 biennium, the allotment Yamhill County, which is dedicated basic services, half of the total biennium amount is included as revenue in the county's 23-24.
Which
Got
is the current fiscal year that just started July 1.
Right. So we're just, it's already there. We're just approving what's already there. then.
Right. She budgeted a placeholder as
Okay.
part of the budget process to ensure that we had sufficient appropriation authority. And so it's built into the budget. We
Got
don't
it.
have to take any budgetary actions.
Cool.
We're there.
I'm good.
Good question.
But great question.
Yeah.
Okay, any further discussion?
Oh, just that the statistics are a little concerning. And we look at the numbers of kids, the populations of kids. And what I find a little frustrating is that there doesn't seem to be a mechanism to be able to look at whether or not what are the outcomes based on Have we seen any differences? Have we seen any improvements? Those types of things. And I think because the way it was explained is that there really isn't a way to show that metric, but being that I think the specifics are clear. We got a lot of work to do as far as our kids. And women, young girls and boys and the different populations and demographics. So I think if we focus on those.
And so many different issues that go into that as well. I've been really encouraged to see elsewhere in the state that there are more and more youth drug recovery focused centers going up, especially targeted at youth. So there's some progress being made, but obviously it's not a quick fix.
And the other thing is when you look at the percentage of kids who have learning disabilities or struggling in school that wind up in the juvenile justice system, it's another example of why we need to be focusing on what's going on in our schools and offer alternatives to the standard public education, which in many cases doesn't work for these kids.
Okay, any further questions or comments?
None.
Thank you. All those in favor of approving item I1 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Item I2 is consideration of approval of an agreement between Yamhill County Health and Human Services and the Yamhill Carlton School District to provide behavioral health counseling for the 2023-24 school year in the not to exceed amount of $94,373.82. And I will move approval of item I2. Is there discussion or questions?
No.
Yes. So under the contract, section 1A, it says the contractor agrees to reimburse the county 94,000 and change for a portion of the county costs. So it's not the total cost of the 1.4 FTE.
But we get that from OHA, correct?
Correct.
But why does it say a portion? Why wouldn't the school be paying the total cost of that 1.4? Because that's how I read it, is that it's a portion of the 1.4 FTE.
Because the state through the county pays for a certain amount of that designated
Through a different avenue.
through us.
Through us.
OHA funds.
So when they say a portion of, that's not the total cost of that particular service.
Got
to
it.
the- to
Okay.
the school.
That's correct. So the 94,000 it's a partial, it covers the
What's the-
FTE, and then we cover the rest with OHA funds or other funds that come through HHS.
What's the rest of it? What's the total? Does anybody know?
I don't have the specifics. It's, I can get that for you.
Yep, I can get that.
But that again is a direct pass through. It's not something that's coming from the county.
Right.
It's coming through the county.
Okay.
Okay.
That's all I got.
Okay, I believe I moved approval. Is there any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Great, thank you. Motion passes. Item I3, consideration of approval of a notice of intent to award a contract to the First Baptist Church, McMinnville, and Yamhill Community Action Partnership for behavioral health housing services.
This is $1.5 million that the county had to award. There were a number of proposals, and I believe you read the two proposals that came in. They were very specific, and I had asked some follow-up questions of Director Manfred this morning related to the First Baptist to find out a little bit about that, and also YCAP. I think for me, the question is, do they have the infrastructure and the capacity to take this funding and do something that's going to show actual, results? And I feel pretty confident based on the work that both of those entities have done, the selection of these two and their stability with what they have already in place. So I would move approval.
I didn't see any clarification on the breakout of the award, is that something that,
Oh, the specific dollar amount? I can't, I don't know. I can find that out.
okay,
But I don't know that the entire award was divided between these two at this point. Ken, do you, I think that we were talking yesterday that there is funding available for there would be funding available for other projects. I don't know if it can come out of this bucket of money, but that in the future, that would be something that would be possible.
Sorry, I'm researching, and if you'd like, I could reach out to Lindsay and see if he's available to join.
Because there wasn't a specific dollar amount.
yeah, unless I didn't receive the information, but there wasn't any supporting documents to,
Did you get the
Um,
proposals from the two entities
No.
that were awarded? You didn't? I
No, I
think-
think all that was provided as part of the packet was the actual notice of intent to award for
yeah,
both
the
of
memo.
these projects, but not necessarily what's being awarded.
Well,
Oh,
that was an email that came to, I know I got a copy of it. I think you might have gotten a copy of it yesterday from Director Manfred that said that she had received a request from me as to what exactly these proposals entailed, and then was including those in the information. Did you not get that one? Okay, because that showed the real specific information in the proposals. I can forward that
I'm looking for it
right now if you want, but it's, hold on one second. I thought you had been copied on that.
And it came in yesterday.
Yesterday.
from Lindsay.
From Lindsay. I know I got one. I think you might have gotten one.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that I was on I might not have been on the email. I get a lot of emails from Lindsay.
Hold on one second. Let me look.
I have one from the 7th.
Do you
Has the
do-
YCAP submission and it has the First Baptist.
Yes, so you have that. You
I do.
should have gotten that, and it will have the actual proposals on there.
But do you know something?
I might,
I've asked.
I
Lindsay.
certainly don't want to speak out of turn here, so if this is incorrect, my apologies. I have been in communication with Lindsay about a housing RFP. I presume it's this one. They have 3 that they would like to award contracts to, but one they're still running background checks on, I believe.
Mhm.
So they're only moving forward with 2 at the moment. So if that answers your question, that does not answer your question. Okay.
No, yeah, because we get the 2 notice of intent to award, but it's missing how much is the award and what's being awarded, and the project details aren't necessarily in what was submitted to the board packet.
Okay.
Yes.
It is not split between 2 though, but
Well, it-
equally between
it-
2,
It
because
is.
there are 3.
Well, there were three, 3
3 submittals,
submittals.
but 2 awards right now,
To
and there
which
hasn't
one?
been, I don't think there's been a final determination on the 3rd, other than we're not ready to proceed with any
Correct.
type of award right now. And that could be why there's a question mark and no dollar amounts, because is this going to be split 2 ways or
Exactly,
3 ways?
Exactly. That's what I guess that's what I was trying to say.
So you should have received the specifics and the proposals. One is from First Baptist, one is from YCAP. And did you get that,
Okay,
Chair?
because it wasn't in the packet, is this something we can move to next week for consideration?
I would imagine so, but yeah, you've got an email and we can go back and.
That's completely up to the board.
Yeah, I mean, and this is just the notice of intent to award, so the contracts will still be coming back before the board at a future
Correct.
date too.
Okay,
Yeah, I just want to make sure before.
Yeah. The reason we do this now is that this starts the 7-day protest period, but unless there are time pressures that the department is under to get these funds, spent, I don't know that delaying this notice of intent to award for a week will cause any issues.
so the 2 proposals, the 3rd one was basically, there was a decision made at this point not to award. And that was saying going forward, that's certainly if there's another pot of money, it could be up for consideration. But the two that we were told were going to have been awarded or would be awarded if the board approved were First Baptist and YCAP. And the proposals are included in the email, but the dollar amount isn't.
Yeah, the only dollar amount I see is for
Yeah.
their proposed budget for direct staff for 200,000,
Right.
staff development, travel, supplies
Mhm.
for a total of 207.
And again, I mean, if this helps at all, if you're approving, if you were to approve the notice of intent to award today and there were still questions about dollar amounts, and those could all still be asked and answered and resolved before the final contracts are approved too. So you're not by taking this action today, you're not designating how much is going to necessarily be spent under either contract. You're simply taking the next step in the procurement process.
I had a question this morning about the entities and, well, we know that YCAP is set up to receive grants, but I was questioning what the mechanism was and whether or not First Baptist was able to accept grants. And Director Manfred said that they do have a board and that her assumption was that they could accept, they had a stream, a funding mechanism, a funding stream mechanism to accept this award. I think we have to probably at some point make sure that's in place.
That would be something that I imagine Director Manfred would be working out with First Baptist as they finalize the terms of the contract, and then that would be resolved before the contract came back before the board. But
That
that's
would be
certainly a
part of
question
scope.
that we
And-
followed up on.
Director Manfred's in the process of joining.
Oh, great. Okay.
Okay,
Because I'm seeing the YCAP one is 800 and almost 890,000. So it appears that it may not be the entire amount of 1.5.
no, that's the total amount for all of the awards.
Right. So the third
The third is
person.
not part of the
entity.
equation at this point.
So she's in transit and it's going to take her about 5 minutes to get to her desk
Okay.
to sign into the meeting. So if you'd like, you could skip over this item and
we'll
go
come
to the
back.
next item, and then we could come back when Director Manfred's able to join and answer questions.
Okay, sounds good. So let's hit pause on this item 3. We'll move to item 4, which is consideration of approval to submit a grant application for the Emergency Management Performance Grant, EMPG, through the Oregon Office of Emergency Management for the 2023-2024 fiscal year in the amount of $78,315. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Any discussion or questions?
No.
Done.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. And why don't we take a 5-minute break while we're waiting for Director Manfred, and we can come back
Okay,
into the
sounds good.
agenda.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome back. It is 10:26 and we are picking up at item I3. Consideration of approval of the notice of intent to award a contract to the First Baptist Church, McMinnville and Yamhill Community Action Partnership for Behavioral Health Housing Services. And we are joined by Director Manfred. Thank you for coming in on short notice to answer some questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there was a question about monetary award and how much money the overall pot is versus how much we're awarding.
Yeah. The overall amount of money that we put out through the RFP was 1.5 million.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're coming in a little under that at this point.
Okay. So the proposals YCAP was roughly 900,000. So the intent is to award the full proposal.
Correct.
Okay.
For both of the awards. The other one was, I don't have it in front of me, but it was a little over 200,000.
207.
Okay. And then Commissioner Sterrett, you had some questions about,
Well, I just was wondering about the entities, and in other words, I had asked you about the mechanism to accept an award. So we know that YCAP is used to doing that, accepting all kinds of grants, and they do have a mechanism in place. But you said that First Baptist, since they have a board, that is the assumption is that that's in place.
The assumption is correct that they would have whatever is required to accept funds. Of course, all of that would be figured out during the contracting process, and those contracts would come back before you as well to approve.
And if there is, so we do have a little bit of money left over, and if there is money that is going to be in subsequent pots for this type of funding, we would do another RFP and go from there.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I would ask County Council to weigh in on this. We received 3 proposals total with this RFP, and 2 of them are coming before you right now with an intent to award request because we feel confident and sure of what that the scope of that and what the status is of those organizations. I think there was a 3rd proposal that we are interested in, and there was some question just because of some of recent dynamics between what was actually happening and if this was going to be a shelter that was going to continue, and just some questions around there that we felt like we needed to get answered before we could move forward. I think it's really going to be, I would look to County Council to determine if we were to do something, if we could do that because they met the requirements of this RFP, or if another RFP would have to be issued.
So presuming that the RFP didn't sort of limit it to 2 contracts.
No.
Then you would be fine moving forward so long as it's within a reasonable time period.
Okay, thank you. And I would say if we did determine that additional funding was available, at that point, my recommendation would certainly be to do a second RFP if it was something outside of what was already occurred with these 3 proposals.
And you did send that out to additional entities in the county, and these are the only ones you received.
Correct. Our process was there was advertising that happened through newspapers, things of that nature. But then I did send it to individuals that I knew were involved in this work, places like the McMinnville Affordable House Task Force, things where people were related, involved in housing and things of that nature.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Thanks for coming in.
Absolutely.
yeah, Commissioner Johnston, any
I'm good.
questions? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Before you go too far,
Oh,
I'll let the board take action on this, but I kind of wanted to circle back to your question on the previous agenda item, seeing how Lindsay's here.
Okay.
But on the previous agenda item,
I'm comfortable moving forward.
the funding for the
Right.
school.
Okay,
Right.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable moving forward, so I can make a motion to approve item I3. Is there further discussion?
none.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Great, thank you. Motion passes.
Yeah,
And
and sorry,
Oh, sure.
and so Commissioner Johnston had a question. They already approved I2, which was the contract with the school district, but there was some question around the funding.
What's the total funding for that?
the total funding, well, so what you saw was the school contract, which is half the funding. So the other half of the funding, which really is a 50-50 split, comes from the CCO and its Medicaid dollars.
And that total fund is paying for 1.4 FTE, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Great.
Hey,
Okay.
Thank
thanks,
you.
Lindsay.
Thank you.
Okay, so it looks like that is the end of our other business. And we are moving on to our public hearing. So that seems to be working. Okay, so our public hearing today is a public hearing to discuss proposed amendments to the Yamhill County zoning ordinance, YCZO, in relation to the allowance of psilocybin crops and service centers in both EFU and AFU zones. And let's see, Jody, do you want to kind of kick us off with a summary of how we got from December to now
Sure.
with our original ordinance?
Sure. So the board passed an ordinance specifying where psilocybin service centers and psilocybin production can happen within unincorporated areas of Yamhill County. That ordinance was appealed by both Friends of Yamhill County and Department of Land Conservation and Development, DLCD. As part of that, and it was appealed to LUBA, as part of the discussions between me and DLCD and Friends, they agreed to stay their LUBA appeal if we worked with them to tweak our code so that it was more in line with what they saw the psilocybin statutes as requiring. And so we engaged in a conversation. We involved Jason Lampman because he intervened in the LUBA. And it was a few months of back and forth, and the proposed amendments in front of you are where we landed. And so that's, if the board so the board can tweak these proposed amendments as needed. There's whatever they want to do, they can approve them in full form. But regardless, I'll have to come back later to actually adopt them as an ordinance. So today is really just sort of to hammer out what you want, if any, amendment to read as.
Okay, and I'm sure we'll hear, but the participants in the process of the compromise, was everyone satisfied walking away, or?
I believe so. I think
Okay.
not everybody got everything they wanted.
Mhm.
But it was my belief that everybody was relatively satisfied. Whether or not it needs to be tweaked a little here and there. I believe Friends is going to be suggesting a couple tweaks, which just reading briefly, I'm not personally opposed to, but yes, I think generally there was a consensus that, okay, we can move forward with this in this concept of how we've tweaked it.
Can you address the differentiation or the distinction now with the campground allowance?
So that is, in my view, the one thing that is going to change based on that is the one thing that's going to change or be most impactful to the folks we heard from in December is it's now going to be a requirement that those individuals who are planning on opening service centers under the parks and recreational area allowance part of our code in the AFU and EFU zones, they're now going to also have to be producers of the crop. In addition, they can't just run a service center. They also need to be producing the crop. And so that is a change from the December ordinance.
So the sort of the drawback on that is the cost of the license.
It's my understanding that, yeah, that is going to be cost prohibitive. I'm not sure what the cost of a license is, but I'm sure we'll hear it today. But it is cost prohibitive. It's an unfortunate consequence of my agreement that the statute does require it. I did agree with both LUBA and DLCD that should probably be added to that section because it was already in the other sections. The wording was different, but it was essentially required for the other two. Basically, anything that wasn't a park or RV park, you had to also be producing the crop, but we didn't put that same language under the park section. It was an oversight. And so.
Okay.
So I think, we have people in the room that participated in the process, but then we also have folks that didn't. So I think that it would be good before we get into public testimony to review the changes that are
Mhm.
being proposed.
Sure.
And what they mean in relation to what we originally approved in December.
Sure. Do you want me to just use the document in the packet and we'll just go down with the highlights?
I think,
Okay.
I think that would be good.
So if you are looking at page 2, first change is to the subsection I was just, and this section 2 is EFU land, the changes to EFU. So in the way I set this up is, and this was my intent was to try to make it less confusing, but I could see how this could be somewhat confusing, is I wanted to track what the original ordinance was and what was changing in the ordinance. Normally, when you propose an amendment, you're just proposing changes to the code. So if there's confusion over that, I apologize. It was my attempt to sort of clarify what's being changed from the ordinance itself.
Okay.
So that's why there's some random underlines and stuff like that in highlights. It's not normal legislative tracking. So the first change is under subsection P, under conditional uses in EFU lands. That is the parks, playgrounds, hunting, fishing preserves, campgrounds. That first highlighted section is where we are adding in the language that requires them to be producing the psilocybin crop in order to run the service center. The second piece of that, the second highlighted portion of that paragraph is new language that the group settled on because there were some concerns about campgrounds having a service center outside the area that they were licensed by the state to have a service center. So if the service center is licensed to be in this particular building, the group really wanted to make it clear that if it's a campground, you have to stay in that building. You can't be providing the services outside of that licensed structure. So that's the purpose of that language. Any questions on that one?
So basically that means that you're licensed for a particular structure, not a particular location.
It could be a location. I don't know the state's licensing requirements well enough to know what it looks like. And I'm sure somebody here will be able to help me with that. But I believe that when you get licensed, you have to be very specific about the area under which you will allow psilocybin to be used.
Okay.
And so that is your licensed premises. It could be, especially for like a campground, that the licensed premises isn't the entire tax lot. And so the concern was that they keep that area confined to the area that it's licensed.
Inside of a structure.
It doesn't have to be.
Okay. 'Cause
That's
that
up
would
to the
defeat The
state.
whole purpose of it being out in
Right.
a campground.
That's entirely up to the state. I don't know what their requirements are inside versus outside.
Okay.
So then the next changes were in subsection T. And it's actually, what we ended up doing was adding the same language about maybe established as commercial activity in conjunction. We added that same language for uniformity and at the request of both DLCD and Friends. We originally just had the last sentence, which was psilocybin service centers shall be located on lots that also hold psilocybin licenses and are actively producing the crop, but that language wasn't strong enough. So they requested that we actually put in the words commercial activity in conjunction with. And so that's the purpose of that. Now the change from production to manufacturing, I believe my memory's a little foggy on this. So if somebody remembers differently, I'm looking at you, Jason, feel free to correct me, but I believe we did that so that we would line up with how the state defines in their rules, the different types of licenses. So I believe that's what that change was all about.
Excuse me,
Yeah,
Jody.
sure.
Because in section in section V, manufacturing All right, we'll get to that when we,
Under the definition section. Okay, we'll get
Oh,
there in a second.
okay.
Okay. The final changes to the conditional use section of our code was again, changing manufacturing to processing. So that was a swap there. And that's a permanent facility for the purpose of processing psilocybin products in accordance with 215, 255. And they, I believe it was DLCD that requested a reference to that statute. I believe the intent is really to try to gain, there's a whole lot of case law around that particular statute. And the intent is that all of that case law has essentially narrowly defined what it means to, if I could remember what that language is. County may allow, so that particular statute talks about processing of farm products. And so there's a lot of case law surrounding what that means. And the intent is that we want that case law to apply. So that is why that statute was put in. Questions on that one? Okay. Going down to the next section of our code, but still in EFU, definitions of terms used in this section, going down to subsection B. I took out the subsection G section or reference there because commercial activity in conjunction with was now in multiple subsections. And so rather than go and put every subsection in, I just gave it a broad 40204. So that was the purpose of that. And then what DLCD specifically requested was that we add psilocybin service centers under the definition terms as a type of commercial activity in conjunction with farm use under our code. So that's why that was a specific request from DLCD. Okay, did you have a question on subsection B, Mary? Okay.
no, I think you
Excuse me,
answered
Commissioner Starrett.
my question regarding the distinction between manufacturing and processing that
Oh.
you make throughout the. so
Yes,
thank you.
and that is, the processing is to match up with, changing from manufacturing to processing is to match up with ORS 215, 255.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so the next changes were all to AFU land. And that's section 403 of our code. And those changes, I believe, are the exact same changes. Yeah, they are the exact same changes that we made to the EFU land. So it's the same mentality behind both. I made the exact same changes to both. And so that was the intent there. And those were the only changes. We didn't make any other changes because the board originally, in the original ordinance, also approved service centers in the PAI zone and the rec zone, and there were no changes to either of those.
Okay. So my understanding in general is that when we did the original ordinance, we did not establish this as a commercial activity in conjunction with
Correct. We just
producing.
required it to be on a lot that was also actively producing the crop.
Producing
We
the
used those words instead of in conjunction with.
Okay. And we also didn't specifically address private parks or campgrounds.
We didn't add that language to parks. I think
Okay.
it was an oversight. I don't know.
Okay. Okay, so in general, this is, it's somewhat of an expansion of allowance of this activity. However, it's also sort of tying it back to the true intent, which is vertical integration of processing the crop.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this is sort of a way to make our code a little bit more in line with case law.
So are we seeing these types of challenges in other counties? And how are they being addressed?
I don't know. I don't think there's too many counties, number one, that have not opted out. But number two, that actually were proactive about putting it in their code like we were. I think from my understanding, the majority of counties are relying on the language in their current code around in conjunction with. Whether or not they're seeing pushback, I have no idea. So they did not address, they probably saw the risks in trying to address it specifically in code, and they chose not to, would be my guess. That's
Okay.
a giant question mark though.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions for Jody?
None.
So I'm going to open up to public testimony. I do want to start with Bridget. I know she had some comments about waiting and not being able to get on last time we discussed this. So I want to start with Bridget, and then we can go to others that are in the room.
Yes, good morning.
And you
Thank,
are live, so go ahead and state your name and address for the record.
thank you. Good morning. My name is Bridget McGrath. I'm in Portland, Oregon.
can't hear.
I,
There we
oh,
go.
sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I want to share my support for small farmers of Yamhill County to legally do this farm use in rural counties of psilocybin mushrooms. I'd ask you to please respect the will of the voters to make a decision based on science and consider the national attention that has been given to this issue. This is a rural farm use. It's a small crop that can be grown in a greenhouse, outdoor bed, small shed. Small farmers will get the most financial benefit from this crop pretty much only if they can provide it directly to the consumer within the legal regulated market. There are safety regulations in place that Oregonians voted for that prevents the use of pesticides, requires organic methods of cultivation, includes lab testing. There's minimal water use that's needed. There are security protocols that are required by the state, all of which will generate economic benefit to any area or county that chooses to allow this use with minimal impact. As a person who lives in the city, I know that there are many folks like myself who would love to enjoy a rural retreat where we can go and support a farmer directly. We can use this farmer product safely in a legal and supervised setting, all while enjoying the beauty of Oregon's famous rural areas. CNN has covered this. Other national news coverage has come into Oregon. Oregon is having national prominence right now because of this issue. So how we handle this is going to make a big impact. It's only really going to bring a small amount of additional tourism to the area, though, to be realistic, just mainly due to cost prohibitions. I don't know if you all have been keeping an eye on Kathy down in Eugene. I mean, this is going to be expensive. So what farmers are proposing is not some huge, 3,000 square foot commercial operation like a winery, although there are already gourmet commercial warehouses in Yamhill County. It's essentially a small value-added crop that can be worked into the existing production of other small farms, whether that's cannabis or other organic farm use. So hosting people on one's land in conjunction with the manufacturing and the service center, it's going to have to be state licensed facilitators, really only a small space, and that could even be limited to daytime use. So farmers are not proposing, huge parties with hundreds of people. We're talking about the equivalent of like an occasional weekend retreat for 2 to 6 people. And again, state rules limit the total group size as well as the ratio of licensed guides to participants. So traffic is going to be minimal. And finally, I just want to refer you to the extensive research on this subject. I think I emailed you my comments, and there's an amazing graph in there that I hope you all can see. When I went to the Horizons conference and Bob Jesse put this graph up on when he presented it, it's just shocking to see that it is alcohol that is the actual risk. while psilocybin mushrooms are very unlikely to cause harm either to the user or to others in terms of safety, in terms of abuse. So I've got a few citations in there if you want. You know, this has been in the Lancet, this has been published in all kinds of scientific journals. It's very low risk, it's very safe. So please just make a decision based on science and the will of the voters. I personally am a teacher who has, experienced and witnessed the mental health fallout of COVID. And so many of us are desperately seeking a nature-based retreat where we can go and, get out of the city, spend a Saturday and support small farmers directly. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. McGrath. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to go
Chair,
to,
before we go on, I don't think we captured name and address for the record.
Oh, okay.
So if she could provide that, that'd be great.
yes, Bridget, if you could just really briefly state your name and address for the record. We missed that in the beginning.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Bridget McGrath and I live in Portland, Oregon. I do not want to share my address just because I know people on this issue have been harassed and doxxed. So phone number, email, that's fine. But as far as a public record of my address, that's a safety risk.
We have your email, so I think we're good. Thank you. All right, so I will move to in-person testimony. And looks like we are starting with Mr. Feidelman.
Morning, everybody.
Welcome. Welcome back.
Thank you.
If you could please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, my name is Joshua Feidelman. I reside at 16345 Northwest Meadow Lake Road in Carlton, 97111. Well, I'm here today. First of all, I want to thank everybody involved on this issue and all of the iterations and work that it's finally taken to get to this point. And being able to move forward with this in any capacity, I think in the county is a positive direction moving forward. It might not work out for everybody who wants to participate in this type of business or service, but not shutting it down completely is definitely a positive thing. As far as personally, my wife and I in our business and how it does affect us, it will definitely not allow us to move forward with the way the county has decided to use this language. As we just heard from the previous person on this subject, I don't think anybody is questioning the vitality or the validity of the medicine and how it is administered. It comes down to land use laws and how in Oregon we either protect or we open the door to our land for businesses other than agricultural purposes. And unfortunately, we feel like we're being held to a double standard. We're allowed to have a business as a private parking campground on our property without having any agricultural process or service or commodity at all whatsoever. But if we want a service center, now we do. That's a frustrating component. And the original language that the county proposed to the commissioners and then to the state and Thousand Friends felt was not good was they made in a way, a special language for the private parking campground. The reason why we were able to have a private parking campground permit on our particular property is because our property is deemed low value soil. There is no crop that we're going to have on our AF zone property that is going to be beneficial in any agricultural means whatsoever. Why do I need to spend all this extra money now to have a mushroom grow on my property, even though it's a very small thing, but it's very expensive. A lot of people don't understand the overhead, the capital it takes. It's $10,000 a year just for the licensing fee for the state, just for that one thing. Then if we want to have a service center, that's another $10,000 a year for that license. That's 20 grand a year. Haven't even made a dime yet. Plus, if you want to be able to grow the mushrooms and process the mushrooms, that in itself is a whole new dynamic when it comes to what infrastructure you need to have in place. Granted, it can be done in a small closet, in a very small room. That's not the issue. The issue is the policing of it, is the tracking of it. Security systems need to be in place. Documentation needs to be in place. When that product moves, goes in and out. I then have to get that product tested before it can be sold to a service center or even sold back to myself as a service center. All of that costs a lot of money that if we want to have a service center, we are not budgeted for that extra cost to be able to do that. So it becomes now prohibitive for us to do that. There's also other businesses I can have on my property, a bed and breakfast, for instance, that doesn't require me to have a agricultural component to be able to have that business on my AF40 property either. So it just feels like there's some double standards, and it feels like that this particular topic then becomes a hot one outside of any kind of agricultural process within the community. And we know that that's a big component of this community. It has been for a very long time. And in no way, shape, or form do we want to challenge that or change that or take away any of the protections that anybody else would have to utilize their land in that capacity, way, shape, or form. Also, the state is very clear when it comes to the licensing of this facility that it is not designated to be inside a structure. They are very clear in their language that they want the ability for people who are experiencing this medicine and under this treatment to have access to outdoors, to have access to nature. We have that. We could provide that. We spent a lot of money and time talking to Emerge Law, which is the law firm that had a lot of input in writing the state's Measure 109 rules and regulations about what that looks like on a piece of property, whether it's an office building, whether it's a home, whether it's a structure that's dedicated for this, and is there an outdoor component that connects with that facility and that structure. And it was deemed through their law firm interpreting what the state had written that we could do that. We could designate a bordered area on the property and make that a designated area that people can experience this medicine and have this treatment on, both in an indoor and an outdoor space. So by unfortunately not allowing it in this capacity in these AF and EU zones, we're taking that component away. And also by adding the language that it needs to be now a commercial entity or a commercial business also then puts in further challenging, because anytime you put in that word commercial, once you start wanting to do any kind of infrastructure, building of facilities or anything like that, now you're subject to commercial building codes and commercial standards, commercial engineering on drawings and stamping and architect. That costs a lot of money, you know, and we're not even zoned in a commercial zone. We're zoned residential, AF40. There's no / commercial in our zoning whatsoever. So that then becomes kind of another gray area. So not that we're opposed, we're very happy that the county's moving forward. It just seems a little janky, and it seems like it's not quite refined enough. And unfortunately, the piece that is really frustrating is this: why does the county even offer the private parking campground permit if it is not that? And you know, and then my wife submitted a written testimony which has other components in there that make it a little challenging for us to move forward. And in time, hopefully we can figure this out. Maybe in time, as these service centers and the combination of a grow and a service center come together and we see how these components work and function, and if they do or they don't, we can then expand on that in the future and then figure out a way we can get more people like in our situation able to capitalize on this endeavor.
Appreciate that. When the amendments came through, I was thinking about your property and how this would affect you. So I appreciate the clarification.
Sure, you're very welcome.
Just one comment, and Jody, maybe you can weigh in on this, the cost involved. regarding licensing and it's not a county requirement. This is the state.
It is.
So it's not as if the county has anything that we could do to mitigate those costs.
Well, the county could definitely make it as to where we don't need to do the grow in conjunction with. And then there where that way we wouldn't have that cost.
So one question for Jody. I know we talked about this at length yesterday and any workarounds to that.
I think the problem, to put it bluntly, is not necessarily the land use law, it's the psilocybin. It's the law that got passed into the psilocybin service law, whatever that was called, the act itself. It actually does specifically say, I better read it. Operation of a psilocybin service center may be carried on in conjunction with a psilocybin producing fungi crop, speaking specifically to exclusive farm use.
Right. It may be in conjunction with,
May.
maybe doesn't.
And
mean
that is
has
it.
to be.
That's a fair argument. It's not a shall.
Right, that's my argument. And I'm allowed to do this business without being in conjunction with. The state obviously opens up in their language that it doesn't have to be. It can be, but it doesn't have to be.
Can I ask, and I might be putting you on the spot here, but I don't think I've approved any private campgrounds since I've been here. Is part of that process to establish that the ground is in fact low value farmland?
That was exactly a quote from Ken Friday, is why we were able to get that permit.
Okay.
That is really the sole reason why, is because our property is designated by the state and the county as low value soil. And that was the one in that we had to be able to do the private park and campground. We met all the other criteria as well. But if we were like in an EF zone or a higher value soil, the county would not allow it. And it states it right in the county's language.
Yeah, I remember that conversation now. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Sorry,
Sin-
go ahead.
Yeah, since it's already a campground, I wonder how hard it would be to actually rezone to recreational commercial. And then be allowed to have only a service center and not have to grow or have the farm in conjunction with.
And I wish Ken Friday was here. So the process of rezoning it is something you could certainly talk to Ken Friday about. Go ahead.
We had some similar and he didn't say no, he didn't say yes, but again, all of this also boils down to attorney's fees, time, lawyers to do all this. And every time we get to this kind of a juncture or kind of a piece that it's just me and my wife trying to do this. And we just don't have that kind of resource, those capital resources to keep going over this. And fighting it. At some point, there's a tipping point to where we're going to lose our shirts if we try to continue to do this. So that's why we're glad that at least it's moving forward in some way. And there are some people within the county that will be able to do this, because ultimately we feel that this can do things, this can really help a lot of people. And it can be a really incredible thing. And that's really what we want to see. We're very realistic in the standpoint of this is not a business that we're going to make money on. This is not something that we're going to do to get rich doing. It is something that we felt if we could do this and be sustainable, just to offer this service and make enough money to keep the business flowing, we're happy. And even at this point, even at this juncture with everything we're invested, we're at that tipping point. And that's why we weren't able to really get involved at the Lua level as much as we wanted to. We just financially, we really tried, but we just couldn't do it. So
Thank you.
hence the rezoning, but that's definitely come up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I would, if you don't mind, I can read your wife's testimony into the record,
Absolutely,
since I only have one copy.
for sure.
Okay. So this is the testimony of Jennifer Leonard, 16345 Northwest Meadow Lake Road, Carlton, Oregon. As you know, my husband and I from Planet to People have been involved here with the county as new rules are created for psilocybin service centers. From the beginning, we have been encouraged that Yamhill County was open to considering a framework for this service and showed encouraging decisions to help businesses like ours move forward with licensing. We want to thank everyone who has been involved to this point in helping us find a pathway to bringing this service to the community. We have followed the progress at the state level and understand the reasons the current amendments were made, requiring the service center to grow the commercial fungi crop on properties with approved private campgrounds. Unfortunately, this will require an additional $10,000 annual licensing fee on top of the $10,000 required for the service center. That is $20,000 per year in licensing to the state on top of our site design reviews and LUCS application. Lux application. Fees like this will require us to charge our clients amounts that will be unattainable for most people who will really benefit from working with these medicines. Our hope was to make a novel, accessible treatment to those who suffer from mental health diagnoses at a reasonable price. Needing to grow the crop in order to have a service center will drive the price to a rate that will only allow access for those who are more wealthy, already have access to other therapies, and be unreachable for most residents of Yamhill County. Sadly, under these circumstances, we don't see it within our finances and values to continue pursuing licensing here. Without further advocacy by the county at the state level, we can't move forward. We do want to support the structure that is being proposed today, knowing that this is the most accessible step forward. Even if we can't personally progress with our business, we understand there are other individuals and businesses that can. This value of the service is bigger than us and our interests. We hope that the board will move forward with allowing these service centers, and in the meantime, ask that the county consider advocating for expanded use of properties zoned for farming, especially within the private campground permit at the state level. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And let's see, next up we have Mr. Lampman.
Buddy,
Good morning.
good to see everybody again.
You too. It's been a while.
It's been almost, I think, a year we started this. And we have a new commissioner, Mr. Johnston. Good to see you. Well, I'm here, obviously still in support of this being available on EFU specific land.
I'm going to stop you really quick.
My name is Jason Lampman. My address is 17175 Southwest Oldsville Road, McMinnville, Oregon.
Perfect. Thank you.
So I'm here in support of this on EFU farmland. This has taken quite a while, and I know that in the beginning, I believe you had asked for a pause, and this has basically been a pause. So that is, maybe that's a positive thing to see kind of the rollout of this. It was not what I wanted, but I think that maybe that would help. Hopefully it's a helpful thing for you guys. I'd just like to say that I didn't have a problem with the original language. I thought it was supportive of businesses in our county. And it was a great thing to see the commissioners have a unanimous decision. I thought that was a lot of good work and amazing. Unfortunately, that's not how it went with the rest of the state agencies. It's my understanding that all the parties have agreed to the current draft that is in there. So that is, I think Jody put it correctly, that I think everybody gave, it wasn't what anybody really wanted, from what we were hearing. I also wanted to, I pulled the numbers today, this morning off of the site. I wanted to also say that the the number, speaking of the pause that you guys wanted a pause, that the number is 4 service centers that are approved is 6 at this moment. So one of the, I know one of the concerns with, I can't remember if you were there, Kit, or if I was listening to it, but one of the concerns was letting the cat out of the bag because there was problems with medical marijuana, with dispensaries being a big rush to it. And I think that having 6 service centers licensed, I believe I think that shows that there really isn't a rush for this. And I think the money, the financial things that both Bridget and Josh mentioned are a huge factor in that, and that this will not be very accessible and it's not going to be cheap. I looked on some newspaper articles that I saw, and it looks the ranges are from $1,000 to $3,500 a session right now. And that is way more than I had even anticipated. But I believe I can work owning my farm, and I can work on that and work with that. And hopefully they lower the prices in the future. Speaking of that, I wanted to address some of the other concerns. Mr. Johnson, I think you had brought up about the issue about dealing with the OHA, and you had spoken about dealing with the OHA, and Ken Friday actually mentioned it as well, about there being a problem knowing who is licensed and the county wanting to be able to access the information, and that wasn't allowed with the OMMP situation. And that's a valid concern. What I did is I wrote an email and called the Oregon Psilocybin Services. It's a branch of the OHA. And I asked them, what can I say to my county commissioners when I go in there and say that this is one of the concerns that I heard? And I got a good answer from the OHA. Can you believe that?
Good.
And it was quick. So I just wanted to state on the record, I wrote it out here. I wanted to state what they had said. And it said, I'm quoting them, it said, Oregon Revised Statute 475A.582 requires the OHA to maintain a telephone hotline for designated city or county employees to verify the address of a location of a premises for which a license has been issued under the revised statutes. First, the city and county employees must submit an authorized personnel form at licensing.psilocybin. Once authorized, city or county employees may contact the local government verification hotline at 971-673-0225. So I just wanted to bring that up to you guys to let you know, like, I feel like that is helpful and solves one of the concerns about safety in that. So moving on to the actual language that amendments in there, I wanted to state one thing that we talked about that could not be changed because it was something that the commissioner specifically had made, was section 402T. Specifically, it says shall be located on lots that also hold psilocybin manufacturing licenses and are, this is the part, actively producing the crop. Actively producing the crop is a part that is going to be extremely hard to do with the rollout of this. As we've seen, we're 7 months in and we have seen, what did I say, six. So I mean, if we're looking at, and there are 2-3 licenses waiting. So I don't know if they have a backlog or they just have a shortage of employees, but this can be, we're at 7 months. I mean, we're more than half a year. It could, I mean, what if this lasts a year? I mean, that would mean that I would be producing a crop and throwing it in the trash. And I think that's, it seems costly, it seems wasteful, and it seems overly restrictive, which is everybody I talk to about this is just, I know that people want safety, but it is like, I don't feel attacked. I feel like this system is that people are really against this. I feel a lot of pushback against this. I was hoping that since we couldn't do it in the mediation, that it was an issue that can only be solved in this room here, that you would consider using a clause. Maybe, Jody has shown excellent wordsmith abilities, maybe that are much better than mine, so that something that says service centers must be located on lots that also hold manufacturing licenses, which it states, or provide reasonable documentation that a manufacturing license is in process. And that could include a Lux and to be verified by the director. Or something like that. I tried to make it sound good. That doesn't, reading it out loud isn't as good as they would say it, but something like that. If you understand what I'm saying, is that if I have to buy a license and it takes a year, maybe it takes even longer. We don't know. It seems that would be, it's already cost prohibitive. If I can't make money with it, it's going to bankrupt me paying the amount for, one of my kids to go to college for a semester. It's just, it seems so overly restrictive. I don't think we need to go over, we have exhausted the conversation about data and people helping. I believe we're all, from everyone I've talked, I believe we're all on the same page with that.
Jason, can you, since we don't grow psilocybin, can you review the process for that? What is the cycle? is there a season? Is there, what's the cycle like?
Okay,
So I
so
understand.
there are a million different ways to do it.
Okay.
The classes that I have taken are similar to the commercial medicinal or gourmet mushrooms, and it's approximately 60 days, and you can do it the most cost effective way is you can do it in tubs like I had brought in, like that. And so you have to take a grain bag. I'm not going to get the correct wording on this, but there's a product that you inject sterilized needle in with the spores of the mushroom, and then you spread that into a medium, which would be cocoa core or I believe wood chips are illegal. So whatever, and then you put it in there, and then you grow them out, and it takes about 60 days, and it would be harvested, and then it has to be tested as well, which is another cost. And is that explaining that?
But you can control the conditions, so you can be growing in the middle of winter.
Yes, it would have to be. I mean, I suppose I heard her say you could do it in a greenhouse. I think that because of the need for a sterile and controlled environment, from what I've learned, and I'm not an expert on this. This is new. I'm a farmer and I do organic practices, so that is not sterile because we're using bacteria and mycorrhiza. So you can. The way that I see me being successful is having a shipping container or a building to be able to control the sterilization of this product. And you could do it in the winter, but it has to be temperature controlled.
Gotcha. So 60 days of grow time. What's the consumption timeline? When do you have to consume them?
To consume them?
Because you were talking about if I grow something, it's 60 days, but I'm waiting a year for a license.
Right. There was no, when I was researching this, I had thought about questions like that, but there were no laboratories actually licensed. So I haven't spoken with a lab. I don't know. I know that the psilocybin is the psychoactive chemical, and it degrades over time. So, I mean, much like, I'm not going to be producing, there are edibles and things like that, which I'm going to be just making the crop and using that because the state allows you to just use the crop. So just like with food, when you process it, it is a little more shelf stable, but I don't really have an interest in getting another license and another what was it called? Another permit from the county to do that or build another building. I just wanted to grow the mushrooms. So I don't know how long that is exact. I'm sorry, I don't know.
Maybe to clarify a little bit to the chair's question. So just step us through the process. You harvest the mushroom. So like cannabis, it gets dried down. Does the mushroom get dried down, or does it have to be kept in the fridge?
So
fresh.
Yeah, you dry it, you dehydrate.
So once it's in that dehydrated, how long will it last on the shelf?
Well,
and still have its psychoactive.
I can't really answer what the half-life or degradation of psilocybin. I don't know, but I do know that part of our business plan is to have a fresh product, just like the reason, because this will be expensive. I think people expect to have the best product when it's expensive. Just like with our hemp or cannabis, we get 2 to 4 times the market value of it. And with our hemp, it's more like 20,000, from $1 to $1,000. And the reason for that is that we grow it and we give it to the consumer instantly, instead of having it stored for a year, say, or something like that. So I don't know. I guess I'm getting off topic. I'm sorry.
No,
Does that
No,
make
you're
sense?
fine.
it's
You're explaining the
helpful.
process, because I know, like with cannabis, there is a shelf life to it, that it is still viable, but the experience is not.
Exactly. There are cannabinoids that degrade, and psilocybin is the same.
Okay.
I just don't know the timeline on it. And what I don't want to do is grow something and then package it and then wait 12 months and then give this to a person that's paying $3,500 for a service. One, because out of respect for their hard-earned cash, but 2, because the testing now is going to follow very closely to the new cannabis and hemp testing, which I'm not sure if you've heard of this, aspergillus and heavy metals. And the aspergillus testing is really, really negatively affecting. I think that the initial number in March when it came out was 23% of crops failed for this and had to be destroyed. And that would absolutely, I mean, I don't know many farms that can wear that burden. And so being tested for that in this, the time when that aspergillus comes up is through storing long periods. And so the best way to combat that is to have a sterile environment and have the product available freshly. And I don't want to overproduce either and then try to have to find a way to get rid of this. I want to have low output and high quality product.
So would we be able to, is that something that they were pretty clear on, had to have that clause in there, actively producing the crop, that a manufacturing license was not sufficient?
No, that is language that the board, I believe it was Casey, agreed to at the request of friends, if my memory is correct. The concern there was, we don't want you to go get it in conjunction with license and have no intent of actually producing the crop. So thank you for the compliment. I can try to reword that. I'd have to probably talk to you about the wordsmithing of it.
Yeah, I'm about that. That did remind me. So that was another reason why I brought up the hotline as well, because I believe, the concern was somebody getting a license and being like, oh, I'm going to build this building and make this license. And I think that if we clarify that you cannot operate a psilocybin service center without having the manufacturing or production, whatever it's called, that with a hotline, you could verify that at any moment. And maybe that is sufficient to.
That is probably a question for the state. I don't know if enforcement rises to the level of you pay for a license, but you don't bother to use it. I don't know. It could be.
Okay. I see. You're saying that you buy a license and you don't actually.
So I think if you have EFU land and you just want to run a service center, you just pay for the license just because it's required, not because you're actually planning on producing the crop.
I see. Somebody tries to break the rules. Yeah, I understand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What would need to happen? Would it have to go back to DLCD? Would there need to be more negotiations with friends in order to
Do that?
wordsmith this?
I don't know if, certainly don't want to speak. I know we have DLCD on the Zoom call and we have friends here, and I don't expect them to speak on behalf of their organizations, but there was no disagreements that I remember over that language. I think we as the county were relying on that language in defense of not using the in conjunction with language. So I would think that they would be amenable to saying, since we added in conjunction with, we're thinking of nixing this other stuff. But I certainly don't want to speak for them.
I guess I feel like we might be over analyzing actively producing the crop language because every crop has a different harvest cycle.
It's
And
not
we
that
don't,
simple.
we don't police people, to say, oh, your hazelnuts don't have any nuts on them for, 9 months out of the year. I mean, you're actively producing a crop. We're not going
Right,
to come in and say, there's nothing here, it's just a bunch of twigs.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm not really as concerned about that. Maybe that's something that we need to be concerned of based on the nature of the crop, but
We could spitfire in here. We can always define what actively producing means.
Right.
We could say, within a 2-year period, you've produced a crop, something to that effect.
Okay.
I don't know.
But don't we have, if you look at, for instance, the requirements for ag deferred property, I mean, there isn't, you can't just say, I mean, there has to be something wherein you are proving up. So that basically, thank you. So that basically, we could say somebody has an agricultural deferment and yet they're not producing a crop, but that comes down to a land use at a county oversight and in terms of an assessment action.
We're getting in the weeds now. Yes. Just a short answer, theoretically. Are you asking me if that's possible?
Well, no, I'm just saying to Chair Bershauer's point about we don't necessarily police, but we kind of do when it comes to the a deferment piece through our assessor's office. If you've got ag deferred land or timberland, you have certain requirements in order to keep that deferral because of the kind of land you have. And if you're not in compliance, then you get in compliance or you lose your deferment.
So it could be treated as a code enforcement issue. A complaint would have to be filed that these guys are not currently actively producing the crop. Ken's shop would have to decide what actively producing the crop means and make an interpretation as to whether or not that complaint is legitimate, and then proceed like they would any other code enforcement action.
yeah, I guess my point is that so if you have a licensed marijuana grow, we don't come in and say, well, you haven't produced this much this year. So, we
Yeah,
don't,
did
we
one
don't
grow
police
this year
that.
instead of 4.
Right.
Yeah.
I believe that there is something in there that says you have to produce once in a year. Maybe you know something about this, but where you have the license and you have to, because there's outdoor farms that only do one grow a year and the rest of the year it is. Actually, the OLCC allows you not to be grown because it doesn't work, right?
It might be true. I'm not aware of that, but that in that case, they have defined an active crop, right? Or an active producing
And
of the
to be
crop.
clear, the reason I'm saying this is because I don't want to come in here and spend, I believe, is it $3,500 for the license to say that I want to do this for the review, something like that, and say I want to be approved to build the service center and get denied that money and everything because I haven't grown mushrooms for a year and thrown them in the trash, if that makes sense. I mean, I'll pay it, I guess, if I have to, but that seems
Yeah,
so.
I mean, just ultimately, if somebody's paying $10,000 for the license to produce, why does it have to be active? Just as long as they're paying the $10,000 a year for their license to have the ability to produce, because I remember this from when I was on the planning commission and somebody from Portland was on Zoom and he literally laid it out to where one guy in their closet could grow enough mushrooms for everybody in Oregon in like one go round.
Mhm.
So the shelf life of this is going to play into how often you have to grow, which to me, it doesn't seem like you're going to be turning crops like once a month, because that would be unless it's just one mushroom.
Well, I
every
want to
time.
do small, one month at a time, yeah.
Right, but to me, if it was a year long, let's just say a one-time crop a year, if
Yeah.
you wanted to specify active farming or just get rid of it totally, because they have a license which they're paying yearly on to have the ability or the to abide by the law to be able to grow mushrooms.
Right.
So I would think that would suffice just all in itself. They're paying the 10 grand a year to grow it.
So again, that is language that the board
That we added.
decided. That is not a statutorily thing. That was a decision that the board made.
But if memory serves, that discussion was because we wanted to make sure that we weren't just having service centers pop up randomly all over the place, with no connection to,
I think it was compared to
farming.
wineries.
Yeah.
Wineries popping up without any connection to the crop.
so in my mind, the wording of shall be located on lots that also hold psilocybin manufacturing licenses is clear. If you have a license to manufacturer, you're growing the product.
Oh, I see what you're saying, without
just-
that last
right.
part of the sentence.
Right, if that's causing heartburn, I don't see how they're any different. Okay, so we kind of dove into discussion a little bit. I want to make sure you finish your testimony here.
Okay, so we talked about yeah, the specifically actively producing the crop. I wanted to just briefly touch on, safety. I think we agreed that there's been more data that's actually come up that says this is kind of safe. And I just wanted to just reiterate the fact. I appreciate you guys, accepting the fact that there is a safety risk, but there always is, and being fair about that. Because I think it's important to define safety, not to define safety as no one will ever get hurt ever. Like that's really restrictive. But and we don't want to be unfairly biased because it's a new thing. Just like with alcohol or anything, we don't put barbed wire fences around a bar because someone might go crazy or something, and it definitely does happen. So I just wanted to touch on safety. That was about safety, and wanted to reiterate that, people who are doing this it's not going to be taken lightly. This is a really significant amount of money to be putting into this. And I want to echo what Josh said, I want to help people. This is a business and I believe I can be successful at this, but there are much better ways to make a lot of money if that were the case than spending all of this. And speaking of safety as well, there was actually a thing that they added right at the end of the year, was that they actually said that there needs to be, on top of the facilitator, one more person. So that should help with safety. There's actually has to be a representative of the business there as well as the facilitator. So there's actually, on a small place like us, and a 1-to-1 thing will actually be 2-to-1 employees to person, which I think it's overkill, but I think that safety is fine. We don't need to, that'll be great. So thank you guys. One more thing I did want to ask, and just suggest when we make these amendments as well, I had a little side note here, that there has been significant pushback on this. And I just want to ask that and say, an amendment, or what is this? This was a ballot measure. A ballot measure is an amendment to state law. And that goes on top of the law. And this ballot measure was voted for by the people. And it says that we can do this, and we can do this license as a commercial activity in conjunction with farmland. And that, I think, should fit on top of it. And I should be able to do this. What I don't want to happen, which I don't know if it's paranoia, but I kind of get the feeling that people are trying to push this into a little box over here on the corner so that later we can say, oh, it doesn't actually fit in farm use or land. And so, or farm property. And so I wanted to make sure that we just think about making rules and respecting these amendments that were voted on, and that we have reasonable reasonable additions that, so that it is possible to have this business, so that I don't come back here and say, oh, you know, this, you did everything right. But it doesn't actually fit this definition. And so I want to, and the Secretary of State, the DLCD and Friends have been really open and I think that it was a good discussion. And I just wanted to just reiterate that I hope that this isn't something that we're trying to make. And then later on, we just made a legislative ban after all of this work, because that would be very, very sad. So I want to say, I can answer questions. I want to say thank you to all of you. This has been extremely, I learned a lot through all of this, and you guys have helped a lot. Jody, I know you have so many other things. I know that I'm focused on this. You have other things to do, but I appreciate the help and the focus on this.
Yeah, well, likewise, Commissioner Sterrett and I have sure learned a lot through this discussion.
Yes, and I thank you for taking the time, because it was an educational process. I certainly did a 180 on this,
Mhm.
but I'm going to go 180 back just to make a point, not for anything related to these amendments, but we've really been deep into the Measure 110 fallout in this county and in the state. And a ballot measure was passed because it was promised that this was going to be the panacea to the drug issue, and now what we're seeing is it's been an abysmal failure, and we are really struggling, and people are dying, and the consequences of addiction are really becoming apparent. So I look at this, and of course there's a specter of Measure 110 that's looming over this. However, the train has left the station, and now what we're trying to do is just to try to make this as tidy as possible. It just makes me a little more concerned in light of the Measure 110 thing, but they are two different things, and we are addressing these
Yeah.
specifics. So I will leave that there and say that at some point in time, I'm going to recall this conversation and hope that it's not the same thing.
I voted for both of these measures, and I thank you for making the differentiation, because I've talked to detectives from when my kids were doing gymnastics right next to the sheriff's office. And I asked a police officer when I was getting a sandwich in Portland, I said, what do you think about Measure 109? And their direct answer was, this Measure 110 thing is terrible. And so people do pull those together, and I don't know what the word is, maybe embarrassed, but like, I wanted it to work. It sounded good, and it's not working. Like you said, I mean, people are dying, and I think that it's important that we do admit that and work. And I am actually trying to figure out a way of how I can help with that, because I think you're right. And it is tied to Measure 109, but it is mentally, at least. And it doesn't seem to be working the way that anybody wanted it to. And we need to, when things like that happen, we need to take the time to fix it. And so I do plan on trying to help with that.
Well, we're working on that as well.
Thank you. You're good.
Thank you for the time you put into this. I have concerns, but they're not germane to this discussion. That's
Mhm.
just a whole another thing, but here we are.
I would like to stay in contact with all of you, because and make sure that we do this perfect, because like someone said, I mean, CNN came to my house. People have come to my house because I gave my address out of like New Jersey, the New Jersey Sun. And I mean, it's like, it's important that we do this correctly, and that we show that we can do this successfully and safely. I think it's very, very important.
Have you had fear for your safety, like Bridget, by giving out your address? was-
You get, I would prefer not to. I don't like people knocking on my door. I wouldn't say it's fear, but I have 3 small children.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's very respectful of people to come to my house, and I don't like that.
But I
at
mean,
all.
pitchforks and torches, or just reasonable conversations?
I mean, it's a strange thing to do. I mean, I work 10 hours a day, 7 days a
Sure.
week. I don't have time to sit around and
Yeah,
talk
no.
about, legal stuff. I enjoy it, but I wouldn't say that I was fearful. I thought
Okay.
it was strange, and I would never do that to somebody. So,
I've noticed a more curiosity. I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't noticed the vitriol that Bridget was referring to, but more curiosity.
most of that is on social media, like, things like, you're going to hurt more people than you're going to help. And just the hiding behind a social media, you get a lot of rude stuff since I started.
Oh, don't we know it?
Is that right? Tell us about it.
Tell us more about that.
I'm view myself as a nice person. I
You are a
cannot
nice person.
understand how anybody can be that rude. It's
Well, the measure for Yamhill County barely passed. I mean, we're talking 120 some votes, I think.
Mhm.
State of Oregon, it passed by 56 to 44.
Yeah.
So I mean, and also written into that measure was an opt-out or for the 2 years, and 7 out of 10 of our cities opted out for 2 years. So
Right.
Right,
there's.
but this is looming over them too. I mean, you have to deal with it at some
Yeah,
point, so.
yeah, exactly.
I guess for me, it's two different issues. It's what Commissioner Starrett mentioned about the problems we see with addiction. However, it's not, psilocybin is not what we're seeing. It is alcohol, which is extremely destructive. It's the harder meth, heroin, all of those things. That's what we're seeing. Some people argue that marijuana is a slippery slope towards those things. We've received a lot of pressure, as you alluded to about this issue, but we've received pressure all the time to restrict marijuana grows, to restrict that crop and the production of that crop, especially adjacent to wineries. And we've pushed back every time. That's why I say it's two
Yeah.
different issues for me. It's the addiction problem that we're seeing, but on the flip side, it's land use and what you're allowed to do. And the state of Oregon has determined that medicinal and recreational marijuana is allowed. It is a crop that is allowed. We have to respect that because we respect it for everybody else. They've now decided that medicinal psilocybin is allowed. So if it's a crop and it's deemed a legal crop in the state of Oregon, we respect that right too, because we do it for everybody else. Grape growers, hazelnut growers, wheat growers, everybody. So on one side, it seems very kind of black and white, but there's a consequence to overuse of these things. And we're seeing that, and it's very destructive.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we believe in personal responsibility, you know?
yeah,
It's not the government's job to come in and say you can and can't do things and put things in your body. So it's personal responsibility. And unfortunately, we're just seeing that there's a lack of consequence, I think, to affecting other people when you do those things. So
Mhm.
that's
And-
where the rub hits.
And I want to say thank you because I now listen to all of the meetings because they're online. So I hear you say consistency so often. And that's part of the reason why I have a farm in Yamhill County. I respect you guys a lot for just offering that consistency and listening to all this. We don't have a time limit. All the other places had a time limit. That is amazing. Commissioner Starrett, you have always been there to give the other side and say, hey, you shouldn't look through this through rose-colored glasses. This is real and there are consequences. You know, you did say that, and it was eye-opening to me. You know, Commissioner Johnston, I heard one time you said, hey, you know, just looking out for the property owners. You said when there was they were, I don't know what it's called, liens or selling properties. You said, hey, has anybody even contacted the neighbors? And they hadn't. You know, I mean, you guys really look out for us, and I'm proud to be from here. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. I want to get to Mr. Friedman from Friends of Yamhill County. Welcome, Sid.
Thank you, Chair Burschauer, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Sid Friedman, testifying for Friends of Yamhill County, Post Office Box 1083 here in McMinnville. Like Josh and Jennifer, and I believe Jason, I want to thank everybody involved in working through from December or January, whenever it was, to this point, to make some compromises in which not everybody got what they wanted, but got to something that is more in line with what state law requires. So we do have just a couple of minor tweaks that we are going to suggest. I don't believe they're controversial. But before I do that, I want to just address a few things that I heard in other testimony this morning. First, with Josh was talking about, well, this seems to be a double standard in land use law, and that private campgrounds are allowed in a mixed AF zone without a active farm use. But for a psilocybin service center, you're requiring a tie to the crop. And, you know, he's right that the law does allow one without a tie to a farm crop, but it doesn't allow the other. And, you know, if, you know, maybe that's one of the perils of doing legislating through the ballot box, because that's the way the law is written. And that's not a Yamhill County issue, that's a state law issue. We support that state law. We believe that when non-farm uses locate in the exclusive farm use zone, there should be a tie to a farm crop. We think that's important. We don't think that the farm zone should be just opened up to all manner of commercial activities that are unrelated to agriculture without a direct agricultural tie. That may be a philosophical difference. I also want to, you know, just point out that while Planet to People may not be high value farmland, it's great timber ground. It's in a mixed farm forest zone. I drive by that property almost every day. It's great timber ground. And let's see, a couple of other things I could address, but I don't want to take too much time this morning. You've been here quite a while. Jason objected to the language, or would like to strike the language that requires psilocybin service centers to be located on lots that are actively producing the crop. And he talked about, well, you know, I could need to, you know, be producing a crop and then throw it away because I don't have a service center licensed yet. I just point out that it's certainly the backers of the measure anticipated that there would be those who grew the crop and then sold it to service centers that are not located in resource zones, that could be located in, let's say, a PAI zone or a recreation commercial zone or some other non-resource zone in another county other than Yamhill County. There's nothing that requires a grower of psilocybin to also have a service center. Like Commissioner, I think Chair Bershauer, I think I'm with you that I'm not too concerned about that actively producing language. I think it's good language. I think we would certainly object, or I expect we would object to its removal, but we may be I think we're overanalyzing it. I've had fields in annual ryegrass. You know, you plow the field after it's harvested, you don't replant it till fall.
Yeah.
So there's a few months there where the crop isn't in the ground, but you're still actively growing it.
Sure.
Same's true for corn, same's true for a lot of crops. I think we're overanalyzing that language, and I expect we would object to its removal. And certainly that wasn't contemplated in the discussions that were had over the last few months. Let's see. So Commissioner Johnstone, you had asked, why do you have to actually produce if you pay for a license? And this again gets back to 2 points I think I already made. It's first of all, it's in the statute. As as county council or assistant county council read, the measure states you can have in a farm zone, and I'm paraphrasing, you can have a service center in conjunction with the production of a psilocybin fungi crop. That's the law. You may not like the law. I think it's good, but that's the law.
Let me clarify on that. My whole point to that was when Chair brought up the shelf life to mushrooms. I could see where you could go a lifetime and grow one tub in your closet and never have to grow again. So my point to that question was, as long as they held that license and paid their fee yearly, would that be construed as an active license? So they didn't have to sit there, grow a crop, throw it away, grow a crop, throw it away to keep an active license. Definition wise, so just to be clear.
You're right.
Yes,
Yeah.
they need to be growing, but it comes into shelf life and maybe it is one time that,
Well,
would last 3 years. I don't know.
My counterpoint, I guess, would be that if that's what you're doing it once in a lifetime and you grow a bathtub full and it's enough to last you for 20 years, your service center is not in conjunction with farm use, then you should be selling your crop to a service center that's in town. That would be my position. So, that just responds to some of what I heard this morning, but I want to reiterate that I think Friends appreciates the work of the various parties to get to this point. I do have just a couple of minor tweaks that I hope will be non-controversial. I shared them with Cody, the county council this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is what's printed out there. Essentially, is the language that's in your packet with two changes. You'll see at the bottom of the first page, under P, for private campgrounds, there's the language added that psilocybin service centers shall only be located on licensed premises as that is defined under OIR 333-333. We suggest that same language be added under T, and you'll see that on the next page. And that's in bold at the bottom of that paragraph. And we suggest that be added both for consistency and clarity. And then the second change we recommend appears further down on that page under 402.10, where psilocybin service centers was added to the definition of terms, but there is no definition that's given there. So we suggested that it be limited to a building, a psilocybin service center be limited to a building or portion of a building licensed as a facility for the provision of psilocybin services. I heard Commissioner Johnstone's concern about limiting the activity to buildings or indoors. So I believe that language to address that concern could be changed to limited to the area or portion of the area licensed as a facility for the provision of the psilocybin services. And the reason being that the uses shouldn't bleed over into unlicensed premises, and they shouldn't include other uses like, oh, we are going to backdoor in a hotel or a B&B and bootstrap it onto the psilocybin service center. As you know, we've learned, unfortunately, over the years that if you aren't explicit or more explicit, there's sometimes unintended consequences. So that includes my testimony. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So on that last one, so the state defines what the psilocybin center is specifically, but you're wanting to extend that to the use of the structure overall. Meaning,
yeah, the concern,
they can't coexist two different uses.
well, the concern is like if I have a psilocybin service center on my farm, that I not, then, I have a, decent amount of acreage, that there's the portion of the farm, which is a licensed facility. And that's the area where the activities take place, that it not occur a half mile away along my neighbor's fence line where he's got something else going on. And that it also not include other uses that are bootstrapped onto the psilocybin service center, like, oh, well, we need to have a 10-room hotel so that our guests who fly up from California can be, staying here while they await their treatment. So that was the reason we suggest that language.
Okay. But doesn't the state law already restrict that?
I think so. Sounds to me, and please feel free to correct me, you really just really want that language that we had above that says psilocybin service centers shall only be located on lots with license. Is that
Yeah,
really what you're
I
trying
think
to get at?
that would be helpful if that was in the definition of a psilocybin thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so that there's some explicit tie back to what a psilocybin service center is, that it not just be undefined in the definitions.
So it is defined up in the definition section of the code, but that definition is tied to the state's definition. And I honestly don't know if the state's definition says those words has to be
Yeah.
on a lot with a license. I don't know that.
Yeah.
But you want to, your goal is to have that language just so it's clear. Is that sort of?
Yes, as clear as possible, so anyone reading the code knows upfront what it is and isn't, without having to wade through different OARs that reference other OARs.
And so I just want to make sure I understand. So you're not wed to the language that is in your proposal. It's more the intent.
The
that
intent,
you're, okay.
yes,
All
yeah.
right. Thanks.
I guess I'm struggling a bit with the last point, because I feel like the state has already tackled that issue to make sure that it's that the facilities, the service center facility is safe and there's not conflicting uses. But what you mentioned was, you don't want to have people put it in a certain part of their acreage where the neighbor might be doing something that's a conflicting use. To me, the site design review sort of gets to that issue. And if I'm the service center person, I'm not going to site it on my property next to somebody who is, running noisy farm equipment. I mean, that's just not smart. So I guess I'm sort of wondering if it's necessary, because I feel like this is already answered by the site design review.
Well, let's see, how can I phrase that? I'm thinking of other times the ordinance has been, our ordinance has been amended. And then we've learned the hard way of unintended consequences. When the agritourism provisions were added to the ordinance back in 2013, the planning director at the time assured everyone that we were not authorizing wedding event centers. Now, it's whatever you think of that, whether that was good or bad. Now we're 10, 11 years down the road, and we have a different planning director who reads that differently and said, well, it does authorize wedding event centers. So whether you agree with that or disagree with that, I think the take home for us is that don't assume, place things in the code if that's your intention. And so if we don't want the psilocybin service centers to eventually be used as a way to backdoor in other uses on portions of the property that are not licensed as part of the premise, as part of the licensed facility, like the example of a hotel or lodging for your guests, or campground or RV park or whatever, which have separate authorizations in the code and other sections of the code. We are better off being explicit when we than assuming.
Okay. So let's take Mr. Feidelman for as an example. So if he were, how would that impact him? You would essentially have to carve off a spot on his campground.
So, I mean, I suppose the state is, the state could potentially license the entire property as a licensed facility. But potentially they might limit it to this area here, which is set up with a, I don't know, I don't know what a service center entails, but a place with ambient music and restful environment. I don't know. And that would be where the service center activities are licensed to take place. They may only be licensed on a portion of the facility or a portion of the property, and that's that the activities, the psilocybin activities, should be confined to the licensed portion.
Okay, but that wouldn't restrict him from having campground activity elsewhere on his property.
No, I mean, he already has an authorization for the
Mhm.
campground. He can have, he and Jennifer can have campers come up there, stay in the yurts, stay in, yes, I don't know, tents.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a separate authorization than the psilocybin service center authorization. I don't think it would
Okay.
prevent somebody who had a licensed service center from subsequently applying for a
Like a
a bed and
B&B.
breakfast
Yeah.
under a separate under a separate authorization,
Mhm.
but it shouldn't backdoor it in.
Okay. Okay, so I have a question about the phrase actively producing crop. You said that that is likely something that you guys would object to. Is there a way where we can, because I don't think we disagree on that. I think that we have the same view as to what that should be. Is there a way for us to define it that wouldn't cause objection?
Probably, but
Okay.
I'd probably have to give it a little more thought. I don't want to shoot from the hip and
Okay.
get it wrong.
I mean, based on what you said and what I was saying, I don't think
Yeah, I think
far apart,
I think our intention is the same.
okay. So maybe we look at that in terms of defining it, because I know why we put it in there, but I also know that there's the reality of how you farm this,
Right.
and that has to be taken into account, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Friedman? Commissioners?
Thank you,
Okay,
commissioners.
thank you.
Thank you.
Jason, you had your hand up briefly. Did you want to respond to anything?
I think he answered.
Okay.
What I was gonna say was, as long as it doesn't restrict.
You got to come up on the record.
Jason Lampman, again, I just wanted to say that he mentioned you don't want to use it to backdoor other uses, but I think you answered it so that what I don't want to do is have it have just because a psilocybin service center is there, it restricts you from using your property for an approved use.
Right, assuming you've got the other approval.
Right.
I mean, I don't know that should be on there.
I'm sorry. So I can get a separate use.
Right.
We're not saying, oh, you have a service center. Now you can't even be a farmer or okay, that was all. Okay.
Yeah.
And would a compromise be, maybe you, Mr. Johnston, you said saying once a year? Is that a good compromise? Maybe you guys could work with them. I don't know if that's something.
I think we'll,
So do you want to talk on behalf of friends, or do you want me to take this up with Andrew?
For the record, Sid Friedman testifying for Friends of the Yamhill County. Without going back to my board, I believe something, and I'm shooting from the hip here, but I believe that saying something like produces a crop annually might work instead of actively producing.
Okay, thank you.
okay. So I want to make sure we have all of public testimony in. So if you are online, I don't see anyone else in the audience here that has submitted a testimony sheet. So if you're online, please raise your virtual hand and we will call on you. You said DLCD was online. Steve? Okay. Okay. Seeing none. So if we tweak the amendment a little bit in terms of definitions, we're gonna have to come back with a new version.
I can, yeah, I can do one of two things. I can come back with a new proposal, or I can come back with a new ordinance and you can debate the ordinance itself. That's either way.
Okay.
I do have three things that are sort of, I just want to, for my own sake, make sure I understand. Define actively producing the crop. Add psilocybin service centers shall only be located on licensed premises as that term is defined under OAR 333. Add that to subsections T and subsections DD. And then update the definition sections to say that a psilocybin service center shall be located on lots that also hold psilocybin manufacturing licenses. So those are the three things I have in the notes. If I misinterpreted your proposals, please, you can either shoot me an email or, okay.
Can you repeat the definition one again?
Yeah, psilocybin service centers shall be located on lots that also hold psilocybin manufacturing licenses.
Okay.
Is that right?
Well,
Ish.
our,
Go, this is messy, I know.
we would actually like to see something a little bit tighter in that it limits the psilocybin service center activities to the portion of the lot that is the licensed premise.
Okay, I misunderstood. I'm glad that we clarified. Okay, so I'll tweak that. Yes.
Okay.
It's the premises you're worried about. It's not the license. It's the licensed premises, not the license itself.
Right.
Okay,
And-
all right.
yeah.
I
And
gotcha.
that the use be limited to that the other uses not be backdoored in, that it be limited to the.
Okay.
Yeah.
I might have to do some
Yeah. Do you want
wordsmithing.
me to give you what we can?
I'll probably just take one from one of the board
So
members.
I have another.
Do you have another copy? Oh, I
I
thought you only had
drew all
three
over mine,
copies.
so-
Okay. Sure, I'll
I
take
figured
that.
I brought a copy.
Oh, okay. Yes, I will absolutely take that. Thank you.
Okay, so on page 2 of that is the definition that is proposed. And I think that even further, Mr. Friedman stated that we would say something to the effect of limited to an area or portion of an area licensed, rather than a building specifically.
So we'll use that same licensed premises language, maybe. The shall only be located, the psilocybin service center shall be located on licensed premises that, as that term is defined in OAR.
I'm looking down here.
Yeah,
But it says building.
but you want to take out the building, I thought.
Kit said it may not be a physical
Might
building.
not be. a
So-
building.
Right. I
It
mean,
sounds
the
like it
whole-
might
the
not
whole
be.
point of a campground and the purpose
Yeah.
of it being out in the country was to, be under the stars and.
If I may.
Go for it.
Perhaps the definition could read something like psilocybin service center shall only be located on licensed premises as that term is defined under OAR 333-333 and shall not include other uses.
But to me, if the licensed premises is the entire campground, the entire lot, then you would restrict other uses. So that could
Okay,
be a problem.
Or not include other uses not specifically authorized.
Unlawful uses, how about that?
Yeah, or unauthorized or,
Unlawful.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
It's-
so
it's
Jody.
It's difficult to think through. I mean, there's always a danger in trying to write an ordinance on ordinance
stop.
language in a hearing.
right,
It's not a good idea, generally speaking. I kind of recommend against it.
but what we
We've
want to
tried that
avoid
before.
is
Doesn't work.
I have a 2-acre farm or whatever. I have a license to manufacture psilocybin, and that covers my entire lot, my entire
Mhm.
2-acre farm. I need to be able to farm other things on the lot. I need to be able to have a house. I need to be able to have farm buildings. I
Yeah.
need to be able.
Yeah, yeah.
And, you know, if I want to do a bed and breakfast or whatever, there needs to be able to be a process for that
So what I'll do is.
and not restrict it.
I'm just gonna add the other, so, psilocybin service centers located on a licensed premise as that term is defined in OAR, and not to include any other unlawful use.
Yeah.
I'll throw the
Yeah.
term unlawful in, because that will encompass the land use
We,
concerns.
we would prefer unauthorized because there are uses that are lawful that may not be authorized on a specific parcel. that could-
Unauthorized.
Yeah, yeah,
Authorized, okay.
yeah.
What is authorized by
Yeah,
whom?
authorized by who?
Well, it would be a permit, you know, some type of planning process that
Then that would be,
they would normally have to go through.
that's kind of a, I don't know that word
I like
is,
that.
what did you say?
Could I suggest that perhaps rather than trying to settle on final language here, which there be a little bit of email exchange or a proposal. I think Ken's nodding his head. I think Christian might be too.
He has a suggestion.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will come up with some language, run it past all the people that need to be briefed. If there's any no objections, I'll bring it in front of the board and you guys can decide.
Okay,
Okay.
sounds good.
And Chair, we have someone in the virtual audience that has raised their hand.
Okay, Mrs. Leonard, if you, we'll bring you on here if you want to.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you. I was just able to kind of log on and I understand that you got my written statement, so thank you. I'm just kind of,
Since you're joining us again, if you could just state your name and address for the record, thank you.
of course, thank you. My name is Jennifer Leonard. And part of what I want to just point out is that the licensed premises and the allowed use is all outlined already in the measure about what is able to be used on the licensed premises. So I'm just pointing this out because I think this is becoming, it's already outlined in the measure. So with looking at the measure, going through and having a licensed premises, you can have a licensed premises on a lot that does not include the entire lot so that you can have other uses on the lot. So for instance, if we have a piece of property and we have a licensed premise in our, if we did it in our campground, the rest of the property would still be available outside of that outlined premises. So the tax lot and the premises can be different. So I'm just pointing that out because some of the language that you're putting in there is going to be conflicting against what the measure says.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, so I don't think that we're in disagreement. I think we're just trying to make sure that we are not conflicting on the language. Okay. Okay. So when I'm thinking of timeline, because we have a meeting next week and then we don't have a session, a formal session the following week.
And I believe I'm out for 2 weeks after that. So, I can come up with language by the end of the week, whether or not I hear back from friends within that time period. I'll probably send it to Jason and DLCD just to be safe. That's out of my control, but I'll try like heck to have it in front of the board by that next week. It might be a late addition.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we know obviously time is of the essence. We're trying to work through the objection and appeal, so but I just wanted to note that we do have some conflicting scheduling issues, so.
But this is also coming forward as an ordinance amendment, correct? So notice requirements hearing requirements. I just want to confirm.
I believe Ken's taking care of that piece,
I know,
so.
but if you're wanting to come back, is that sufficient time if you're talking a week from today to come back?
Oh,
Is
for the
that
newspaper
sufficient time
notice?
For noticing and
Nope.
It would be, I think.
I believe the notice is for the hearing. Not necessarily for adopting it.
because this will still be subject to another public.
I'll have to ask Ken. Because it will require another hearing because it's a new.
Correct.
Okay.
It'll probably have to happen in August.
Okay. Okay, so I am closing the hearing, right, correct? Because the next one will be a brand new. Yes. Brand new hearing. Okay. Okay, hearing nothing further. Any other comments or concerns from commissioners?
Christian, could you repeat what you were saying? I don't know if you meant for us to all hear that or.
No, it was really just to clarify the purposes of that. For another public hearing before we consider adopting the ordinance at that next hearing.
My assumption was that it was just another hearing. Unless you want me to bring an ordinance.
I think, I mean, I can speak for myself. I would be fine with an ordinance, considering what we've discussed today.
Okay, I can bring that, sure.
They already had two that agreed, so it doesn't matter.
You can count, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we will close our public hearing and go into announcements. Commissioners, any announcements?
None.
I just wanted to, thank you. I just wanted to suggest, because I know the fair's coming up here pretty quick, but last year, was it last year? We had the fair ambassadors come and do a little like presentation really quick. It was, a couple minutes each, but have you thought about inviting them to come forward and practice their public speaking?
I have not. Leslie's in charge of that department, but I
Okay.
will send her an email and get that on the list.
Okay, that year, I think it was last year, that they were just having trouble finding places to go and practice. So that was the suggestion, was to come here, but
I think even if they're not finding hard to find place, I think they should still do it. So
okay.
I think it's great.
But we only had 2 last time.
With three,
3,
now we have 4. Yeah.
We have 4 this year.
yeah.
So, anyway, I just want to throw that out there. Any other announcements? Nope. Okay, Ken, Christian, any announcements? All right. I think that concludes our meeting. I will adjourn the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal session for July 13th, 2023. It is 12:19. Thank you.